Hello, everybody. I want to welcome you here to Prog Monster. My name is Murph. I am the host of this show, a show dedicated to progressive rock and other forms of rock music. So we're here today to do an episode of Commonalities Compared. This is a show that I do every Sunday night, given to me by Ben, my subscriber. He picks out the two commonalities, and I basically talk about the two, what's similar about them. Maybe there's some big differences, might be today's. But normally what we do is he picks out either two albums or two bands or two drummers or two bass players or two producers, something that have in common. And in this case, he's picked out two keyboardists. So the two keyboardists mentioned today are Deep Purple's Jon Lord. He chose this album to display it. And Emerson, Lake and Palmer's Keith Emerson. This is their debut album, I believe, right? Yeah. So anyways, my experience on these two particular keyboardists isn't exceptional. It's not exceptional. These are not two guys I really follow all that much. I have a lot of other keyboardists that I like. And it's not that I don't like either of these two, but in the case of Emerson, Lake and Palmer, I think I have a tiny bit of animosity towards Keith Emerson, not because of his abilities, but because he's so dominant in this band that they don't use the guitars, and I like guitars in my progressive rock. And there are some bands that don't have any keyboardists in them that I do like, that have no guitarists in them, with just keyboardists that I do like, but for some reason I've never really quite warmed up to these guys. As for Deep Purple, I like their music a lot. I find their keyboard is a dominant part of that, but I don't necessarily like Hammond organ, which is, again, so those are the commonalities that I have, is I don't really like certain aspects of these two bands based on a lot of keyboardists. Now, I know I'm going to take a bit of a hit, because these two keyboardists are well loved, especially the prog one, Keith Emerson. Many feel he's the best keyboardist that's ever been. I'm not going to argue with that. That's all subjective. Anyways, I keep getting pop-ups here in the corner for upgrades to my thing. I don't really want any at the moment, but it won't. It persists. Anyways, both bands, or both keyboard bands, in this case, these bands came out in the late 60s, early 70s. Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and this particular album came out in 70 as well, I believe. So so the time period is really quite how you say, common for the both of them. They both came out, both these albums I think were the same year. I don't know why, I think that was kind of a fluke that I did that, but so you've got one guy playing in a progressive rock band and the dominant person in that band. And then you have the other guy playing in a kind of a hard rock blues band with some prog in it too, who is not necessarily the dominant guy, but one of several dominant guys in the band. So they have that in common. They're both fairly dominant. I think Jon Lord is more of a keyboardist, playing mostly a lot of keyboard instruments, of course. Great, and I don't want to give the impression that I think Keith Emerson is not a good keyboardist and doesn't play the keyboards much. He does. But I think he's known more for his synthesizers and his wild noises and his distortion of the computer and the keyboards than he is for his actual playing. Although his playing is exceptional, maybe between him and Rick Wakeman for the best kind of keyboardist that's ever been out there. It depends on which angle you're coming from. From my angle, I like Rick Wakeman more, but for people who like Emerson, Lake and Palmer, obviously Keith Emerson is the dominant force there. Both guys are passed away now, of course. Jon Lord fairly recently, I think in the last 10 years. I think it was cancer, if I'm wrong. Somebody will let me know. Keith, unfortunately, had bigger issues and passed away, not necessarily of a disease, but of his own doing. That's unfortunate, to be honest with you. It's a shame such a talent like that has to go by the wayside because of emotional issues, but it does happen. The other two things about these keyboards is, for the most part, I think Jon Lord has played a fairly substantial part in Deep Purple, and played on every album by them right up until he passed away, I believe. Where Keith, of course, played on every Emerson, Lake and Palmer album. I think that most of the music for Emerson, Lake and Palmer, the musical parts, the dominant musical parts, were by Keith Emerson, but I believe that the lyrics for sure were written by Greg Lake. But I think he's the dominant kind of guy in the band. I guess the complexity of the music is really different. You've got one that's a lot more progressive, maybe the poster child for over-progressive, whereas the other band is definitely more of a hard rock band. Some would classify as a metal band. Yeah, they have metal elements. I wouldn't call them a metal band, though. That's just me, though. I never ever have thought of them as a metal band. And of course, both have appeared with several groups. Keith Emerson with the Nice, and then with Emerson, Lake and Palmer, whereas Jon Lord, of course, with Deep Purple, and then later for a while with Whitesnake as well. So yeah, both interesting, substantially considered among the best keyboards of their time period. And both very innovative at the same time. So tonight's episode was Jon Lord of the Deep Purple, Keith Emerson of Emerson, Lake and Palmer. And I hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you have, please hit the like and subscribe buttons. Much appreciated. If you want to make any comments about either of these two fantastic keyboardists, you can put that in the comment section below, or in the stuff that you like by them, or maybe stuff that maybe you don't like by them. You can do that as well. And don't forget to hit the notification bell so you don't miss next week's Commonalities Compared. It was nice to see you all out there today, and we will see you next week on Commonalities Compared. Take care and have yourself a good evening. Goodbye.